Hey.
This thing on?
And then the mic.
Check. The mic?
And then,
Oh.
and then, yeah, that's the handheld. Well, there's both, because you want, that's for the Zoom.
Oh, I see. Good evening, everyone. My name is James Weir. I'm the Vice President of the Washtenaw Bird and Nature Alliance. Great to see a lot of familiar faces as well as some new ones out there. Thank you all for coming tonight. As you can see behind me, the program tonight is a lens on Panamanian wildlife, presented by our treasurer, Keith Dickey, here in the front row. I'll bring him up here just momentarily. Couple things to mention about upcoming walks. For the rest of October, I'd just like to promote our Monday evenings at the Botanical Gardens. That's Monday at 5:30 for the next 2 weeks to finish out migration season strong, as well as the Thursday morning walks at 8 a.m. at the Riverview entrance of Nichols Arboretum, led by our past president, Juliette Berger. Many of you have been to those walks, and hope to see some of you out there as well. A couple other exciting things coming up in the next few weeks. We are going to go searching for waterfowl on the 26th of October at Watkins Lake State Park. That's an annual trip we do every year. That'll also be led by Juliette and Isaiah, so that should be a good trip. That's, I believe, at 9 a.m. on the 26th. We also have a tree identification walk at Bird Hills on November 15th. That should prove to be interesting. It'll be after most or all of the leaves are down, so we'll be focused on looking at bark and other specific things that you can use to ID trees all year round when they're not flowering or leafed out. Our president, Matt Spohr, was not able to be here tonight, but he is convening a committee to sort of update our constitution and bylaws for the organization. So if any members would like to participate in that process, please reach out to Matt directly at president@washtenaw.bna.org. You can find that email address on our website as well. Last thing I will mention is our next program in November on the 19th. U of M creative writing professor and poet Keith Taylor will be here. He's also an avid birding, and he'll be reading from some of his poetry collections and talking about the intersection of literature and birds. So hope to see some of you all out there next month and on the walks. We also have this lovely merch table here if anybody wants to rep the Washtenaw Bird and Nature Alliance out in the field or in your workplace or classroom. So after the program, please feel free to step up and get some of that. So thanks very much for being here, and without further ado, Keith Dickey. Are you using this too?
Yeah, thanks. Yep. Hey, thank you all for coming out. Pretty excited to share some of my images from a recent trip to Panama. My wife and I went to Panama last March for about 10 days, 9 nights, 10 days, and we spent the first 6 days and nights birding and the last 3 or so snorkeling and on the Caribbean side. So I guess a couple caveats. One, this presentation is very image heavy and content light. So if you're disappointed, then I apologize. But I fear that the only thing you may take away from this site is that Keith went to Panama. He saw a lot of critters, and he took a lot of pictures. But I'll try to throw a few fun facts in along the way. And then the other caveat is I took our new name very seriously. So while there's lots of birds to be shared in these slides, I also went deep into the other critters that we saw, both on land and in the Caribbean Sea. So looking forward to sharing that with you. Let me get the clicker here. I'm going to wander around a little bit, I think. Well, let's see. So, as I said, we were there in March, and we split our time between 3 locations. Those of you who are accomplished birders probably know the Canopy sites very, very well. There actually are 3 of them. We had the privilege to stay at 2 of the 3, Canopy Tower and then Canopy Lodge. The 3rd one is down in the Darien region, on the way to Ecuador. We didn't get that far southeast in the country. Instead, after getting our fill of birding, we flew to the west end of the country to the Bocas del Toro region, where we settled in at an eco lodge right on the water in a sort of mangrove bay, sitting on top of a beautiful coral reef. And we spent our last 3 days there in sheer bliss, albeit, as you will see, quite simple surroundings. So let me first talk a little bit about Canopy Tower. You can see it's just northwest of Panama City, so it's about roughly a 45-minute, maybe an hour drive northwest of Panama City. And it sits up on a hill in the Parque Nacional Soberania, and it overlooks this large park and canopy. And you can see that it's sitting right along the canal, which is running from Panama City up to Camboa, and then through Gatun Lake, and then through the Gatun Cut. So you can actually see the canal and the boats floating through the canal from the tower. The tower is a pretty special thing. It was actually a U.S. radar observation tower. It was built in 1963 at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis to, frankly, defend the Panama Canal and the region. And when you drive up, it still feels like you're entering a military camp. For whatever reason, they still have the barbed wire up, they still have the old U.S. military sign, but the tower first used for these defensive observations. It was later used a little bit as an air traffic control tower, and then it was finally decommissioned in 1995. Then it was subsequently gifted over to the country of Panama, and then Panama in turn entered into a long-term lease with the founder of this eco lodge, now Canopy Tower, and he also grew up at Canopy Lodge, which is another one of his extraordinary sites. So he took this crazy structure on and he turned it into an eco lodge. So it's literally like this tin tower. There are rooms on several floors. It's pretty simple on the inside. And up where that orange dome is, that's where the original radar equipment was. The radar equipment's long gone. And by the way, just for orientation, you can see a person up there on the observation deck. So you can climb up to the top of the tower, and then you get a full 360 view of the canopy, which is quite amazing. And I'm taking this picture from down in the parking lot. They have a slightly elevated feeding station for hummingbirds. So that was another place we all hung out quite a lot. This is what the inside looks like, just below the dome. So the top floor is both sort of common space for gathering and talking about and going through your bird lists, and then it's also where they serve the meals. It was a really nice space. And then to the right there, you can see the ladder that you could then climb up to get on top of the tower. And they would serve coffee every morning starting at dawn up there. So it was just the perfect start to every day. And I'll just warn you, I'm an okay photographer. I'm a really bad videographer, but I wanted to give you a sense for what this looks like from the top of the tower. So there we're looking north towards the other side of the country, towards the Caribbean. Looking east, then you can see the canal in the distance there, the cut of the canal. I'm sorry, west, not east. A few stalwart early morning birders already. The scopes are out. And then now to the south, you can see in the distance is Panama City and the sun just coming up in the east. And people feeling pretty happy about that. So with the help of my camera and a little bit of cropping, you can get a sense that the Panama City really isn't that far away from the tower. But you have, between you and that city is this extraordinary canopy of lowland tropical forest. There again is another shot, so you can see one of the ships that's cruising through the canal on its way northwest. And this, when you walk up and sort of before you start getting your spotting camera out, this is sort of what it looks like from the top of the tower. And right away, first thing you'll see for sure is some of the great canopy dwellers. This is a really fun place to see parrots, right? I did a little bit of birding in Belize. I spent my entire time with my camera looking, straight up, trying to find those parrots at the top of the trees. Here you get to look at them at parrot level. It's really fun. So that's a red lord Amazon parrot. There's flashing his stuff. Mealy Amazon, little plainer. Brown hooded parrot right there. And all of this is just from the top of the tower. So I haven't taken a step yet. Orange chin parakeet. And I threw this in. I'm actually not going to show you. I think the next bird is also a bird that we would see here in Michigan in the summer. Otherwise, I don't think I've included any birds you would see here, except for this one, this bay-breasted warbler. I added this because it was so amazing to be at the top of this tower and looking down on warblers finally. It was quite excellent. So there's the one other one that, that we know and get a chance to glimpse here, but to be able to see it on endlessly and the top of this tower was pretty special, this summer tanager. Some of the other really colorful folks that were on the tower, this is a blue dacnus, a male. The female's pretty darn spectacular too. And here's another look down. Again, looking down on these songbirds is just amazing. Green honey creeper. There's the female with her beak chock-a-block full of insects that she's plucked off the canopy. A little bit less spectacular, the palm tanager. And here's one pretty dull bird on the whole. It's a mistletoe tyrannulet. But I added this, I wanted to keep this one in because as I was firing off photos of this bird and then looking at them afterwards, I realized I was watching or seeing, had documented a kind of interesting behavior. At first, I thought this little guy was eating insects, because I could see these little white globules that I thought might be aphids or larvae or something. But then I looked at my next photo and I realized he's not eating it. He was actually spitting it up and carefully placing it there. So I did a little reading, and it turns out, yeah, the mistletoe tyrannulet is one of those birds that eats the little drupes of the mistletoe and then digests it pretty quickly and then spits up the pit. And for whatever reason, this little guy's pretty fastidious about it. So rather than just spitting it out, he wanted to lay them in a row on the branch. So I thought that was pretty cool. I also learned that, while the whole idea behind this coevolution is that these birds would be dispersing these seeds, right, and helping these mistletoes to spread their reach. In fact, they digest these things so quickly and they spit the seeds up before they ever move on, so they're not actually very good at dispersing seeds. Lower down, if you're walking down to the base of the tower, we also had a pair of trogons. These are black-tailed trogons. This is the male. They were nesting. This guy was there reliably every morning. And again, I caught him kind of doing the same thing. There he is spitting up a big old pit after eating some kind of fruit. So he's in the regurgitation game too. Spectacular colors. The eye rings are crazy. I just love all the different textures and colors of this bird. Also, right there in the parking lot was a pair of red-rumped or scarlet-rumped caciques working on a nest. Just spectacular, large bird, right? Bigger than, or as big as a crow. But there are also lots of hummingbirds, and you would see them on occasion up in the canopy. And this is a blue-chested hummingbird, a female, and there it is, sort of blown up, cropped up, floating at canopy height. But the real action was down at the hummingbird station, and this is what a male blue-chested hummingbird looks like, and they would frequent the feeders. Not to be confused with the violet-bellied hummingbird, which was also hanging out there, and I would get them confused. It took me a bit. And you can see the tip for the violet-bellied was that bicolored, beak. So when I saw that, I said, okay, now I know what I'm looking at. But the primary activity, the big cluster of hummingbirds was the white-necked Jacobins. And this was a bird that was familiar to me from Belize, and I always loved seeing them. And they were here by the dozens. There's a close-up. And there's a female in the female plumage. And you might have noticed I put a question mark next to the prior picture with the male question mark. Turns out that even though there's a lot of dimorphism, or is that the right word? The male and the female plumage is quite different. It turns out upon closer inspection, about 20 to 30% of the females actually take on male plumage. They all start out as juveniles looking a bit like a male, but we've come to appreciate that even some of the birds that look like males are actually females, and the theory, at least, is that they've evolved this plumage, frankly, in order to keep from being harassed by the males. So kind of an interesting fact about these guys and gals. When the Jacobins weren't crowding the feeder, you would occasionally get one of these hermits, and this is a long-billed hermit, huge hummingbird by comparison, really attractive with its crazy tail feathers and plumage and its super decurved bill. And then we would also sometimes see the striped-throated hermit, much smaller, a little bit buffier, and I put them side by side on the next slide here so you can sort of see the size difference was, you might not think from the plumage that they were that easily distinguished, but when you see them in size, you know immediately what you're looking at. So those were fun visitors. And now I'm going to show off a little bit. I am proud, for those of you who are photographers, you probably know that taking a picture of a bird in flight is hard. And it's especially hard when you have foliage behind the bird, because what happens is your lens is trying to focus on the trees in the background, so you keep losing focus. So and then hummingbirds are generally hard, but at least they feed, right? You can catch them at a feeder, and they're kind of still. To get a hummingbird in midair with foliage behind them, I'm kind of proud of the photographer feat that this took. And then, and I have a pretty decent camera, so you could even then, because think about that, that's already at a binocular distance, right? That bird is actually a lot farther away than it looks in that photo. But then when I cropped it up, the camera sensor is good enough to, even at that amount of cropping, continue to capture some of the detail. And that's a black-throated mango, and it's a female. And what's cool is she is breaking, right? She's stopping, so she's spread her tail feathers out to halt. And you can see this red plumage that you don't otherwise easily see when she's just flying straight or hovering. And that's the other side of her, and you can see the female has this long stripe. The male's body is more solid. But back to some of the other birds then that we saw out and about, away from the tower itself. We went up to Camboa. We birded the very famous Pipeline Road, which is really a hot spot for birding, and the road itself has interesting history. And then we also birded in the forest around the tower, as well as in a nearby park called the Municipal Summit Park that was right on the edge of the same area. On the way to Gamboa in the marshes, we spotted this snail kite, who's no doubt hunting for his favorite food, the apple snail. And you can see the really crazy, fierce-looking bill optimized for pulling those snails out of their shells. Another fine hawk. This is a semi-plumbeous hawk that we saw on the Pipeline Road. Pretty stern guy. I feel like he's giving me the finger. But he's probably stern even when he's not being disturbed by photographers like me. But he was a beautiful bird. Literally 2 steps later, this is a crimson-crested woodpecker. Not that dissimilar from our pileated, similar in size. And when I was in Belize, we would see, I think, pale-billed and lineated, also in that same general family. But this was a new bird for me, and this is a female with the very strong white stripe on her face. Keelbill, just added one more here, kind of got to see good views of a keelbill while we were there. But as I was walking past that plumbeous hawk, I spotted this guy popping out of a hole in the tree. So this is a yellow-throated toucan. And in fact, there were 2 of them in this tree. So I guess it was a nest, I'm not sure. But he sat there happily and letting us check him out for a while. Then he flew out and away. And as soon as he started flying, the second one came out and darted with him or her. So that was really a special moment. Oropendula, I saw another type or species of Oropendula in Belize. This is the chestnut-headed Oropendula, or pendula, sitting in a ceiba tree, which is a really common, beautiful, giant tree in Panama, and I imagine elsewhere in Central and South America. As it's young, it has these crazy thorns all over the bark, and as it matures, the thorns go away. But it's a super majestic tree when it's in full maturity. And the Oropendula build these crazy big hanging, Baltimore Oriole-like sock nests. So you see those hanging all over this tree. Here's another cacique. This is the yellow-rumped cacique. We saw the scarlet-rumped before, but this is the second one. The blue eye just blows me away. Between the contrasts and colors are just absolutely amazing. And shortly after that, semi-plumbeous hawk and the yellow-throated toucan, thank goodness for guides, right? Like, they can find these things. I would have walked by this 16 times. This is a great putu, or potu, and doing what they do during the day, which is sitting as still as they can and trying to look like a snag. And then, interestingly, if they do think they're being observed, they ever so slowly raise and extend their head, so that they look even more like a stick. So this guy did the full show for us. That was an amazing experience. Didn't see too many puff birds. I think this was the only one that we encountered here. I had seen plenty of those in Belize of different species, but they're a favorite for me. Too many flycatchers. I had to really think about which flycatchers I was going to include here. This is by far, and I think in a way, the biggest family of birds that you'll see in Panama. I included a couple that I thought were kind of special. This is a piratic flycatcher, named, the pirate is literally part of the name. These guys harass the Oropendulas and the caciques that I just showed you, and will harass them enough that they abandon their nest, and then the flycatcher takes over the nest for its own use. So kind of a tricky little bird. Less tricky, but kind of funny looking, is this very plump little common toddy flycatcher in the tyrant flycatcher family. This one, a little fiercer, southern beardless terranulet with the nice wing bars and a bit of a crest there. I thought he was a pretty attractive bird. I like Kiskadees. I first encountered Kiskadees when my wife and I decided we needed to do a quick escape from the US after a certain president was elected. And so we dashed to Bermuda, and the great Kiskadees were everywhere in Bermuda, hanging like lemons from the tree. So I always get a kick out of seeing them. Tropical kingbird, not a particularly, very common, not particularly special flycatcher, but I kept getting them confused with this tanager that I had never seen before. This was a lifer for me. This is a gray-headed tanager. And at first, every time I saw one, I thought, oh, that's just another kingbird, but I was wrong. Flame-rumped tanager, another spectacularly colorful bird. And this is my wire series now, in case you were wondering. Blue-gray tanager, common, but part of the theme tonight. But the crimson-backed tanager was new for me, and just a spectacular bird. And I inserted him again in a few minutes because we saw him a lot at Canopy Lodge as well. That's the male that has an even whiter bill than the female. Otherwise, they look pretty similar. and a masked Tyra, funky looking bird. And then moving from the wire series, the ones you see easily sitting on the wires, to the things that are a little bit harder to find, I wanted to start with the barred antshrike. Skulky birds, and the Latin name I put up there to remind myself, the Latin Thamnophilus. Thamnos is a shrub, philos, loving, so this is a shrub-loving bird, and doliatus means barred or striped. Well named. These guys are skulky. They're tough to photograph because they're always deep in the damn shrub and tough to get a clear line of sight. That's the male. Female, quite different looking. I think equally beautiful, maybe more so, arguably, and a little bit easier to find in the shrubbery. Quite a nice bird. Smaller, black-crowned antshrike. I don't know if it's a species split or a name change. Purple-throated fruit crow. This was really hard to get a picture of. I kept trying and trying and finally did. Not a crow at all. It's actually in the Cotinga family, and it can sort of flare up the throat feathers, so quite spectacular when it's kind of doing its full display. More small, skulky birds. The wrens are often tough. Black-bellied wren, song wren, chestnut-backed antbird, also with this kind of orbital patch, or kind of featherless blue orbital patch, kind of funky looking. A favorite of mine, I did see these in Belize as well, dot-winged ant wren. This is the male. Again, female, rather different, arguably even more attractive. Both of them tough to photograph. These are quick little birds, a little bit like kinglets. Like you just have to fight and fight to get a good picture of them. Mustached ant wren. This guy or gal was building a nest, which is probably the only reason it became easy to photograph him. And you can see the beginnings of that nest, just these really fine moss-like tendrils that it was collecting and building its nest with. So that was fun to watch. That was also on Pipeline Road. I love mannequins. This was a new one for me. The velvety mannequin, I think it was a split from what was previously one species called the blue-capped mannequin. This is now the sort of northern species, now recognized to be a different species entirely. A pretty jaunty guy, kind of like that beret look. The female's a little bit plainer, but she still has that kind of lime cap, which is pretty cool. And then the smallest of the passerines, at least on this, I think on the earth, I'm not sure, this black-capped pygmy tyrant, tiny, right, the size of a small hummingbird. And you can see it's got nesting material, super cute. Then I'll move to one of the largest birds in Central America. This is a harpy eagle. This is one in captivity. I did not go down to the southeast side of the country where you can find these, and I think Wayne can tell a story. He did. I suspect others of you may have. This particular eagle is named Panama. It actually was born in the Metro Zoo in Miami. And at 3 years old, it was gifted to Panama, to the Municipal Summit Park, that right next to Canopy Tower. And this bird has a beautiful, huge enclosure. They take very good care of it. It is now 16 years old. And as you might have guessed, this bird is the national bird of Panama and figures prominently in their national seal. It's quite spectacular. There's a kind of close-up of the beak. Pretty formidable bird. Yeah?
I just want to add that years ago, they used to have a couple nesting in Pipeline Road of the harpy eagle. So people who walk there have to be very careful because they were very protected. So they could flew on you.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to repeat for the Zooms and for the audience in case folks, but one of our attendees here at the library said that there used to be a pair of harpy eagles that were present and nesting on Pipeline Road. which is a little bit north and west of their typical territory, but probably both an attraction, because that's a very popular birding spot, but also a little bit dangerous because they were protective and swooping down on birders. So thank you for sharing that. So enough of birds for the moment. I'm going to switch to non-avian critters. As you would expect, we did get our fix of sloths. This is a brown-throated three-toed sloth. There's a close-up of this guy. He was just down the road from the tower. We walked down to see him. Again, guides help. I could easily have walked by this sloth multiple times. He's a male, and you can tell that because he has this orange patch on his back with this black stripe. Adult males of this species will have that feature. It actually is a feature that emits pheromones to attract females. So I read. But I thought that was cool to see. Another mammal that I'd never seen, and we had it up at the beginning of the talk, are these Panamanian Night Monkeys. Wonderful, beautiful, small creatures, tiny. They are nocturnal, and you can tell from their huge eyes. And they were up, no doubt, because we were slightly disturbing them, but our guides were really careful. They brought us one by one around a corner to be able to peer and see these folks. But these monkeys were very interested in us too, so they would peer out from their hole to see us. I did not sense that they were really threatened or disturbed by us. Beautiful creatures. There's a close-up. At the other end of the spectrum are the mantle howler monkeys. So if you've been to Central America, you will maybe know these by sight. They can be hard to spot in the canopy, but you can't miss the sound. And I'm going to attempt to play a little audio here. Let's see if it's going to go. Yes. Oh, no, it's not going to go. Shoot. All right, well, I'm not going to try to fix that now. I know what happened. I wear hearing aids, and my laptop switched from the audio to connect, so I'm hearing it, and none of you are. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The last picture, were they a male or female?
You know, I don't know. I'm not sure that the males and females look that different from each other, but I don't know. So that's what, and this guy's he was probably the alpha in the pack. He was at the front, and he was staring us down big time. But some of the other members of the troop, and there can be 20 or more members to a troop. This was one towards the back. I couldn't really tell whether this was maybe an old man, old lady, but looking thoughtful and a little bit tired. Really curious expression.
In the previous picture, was that actually a tail wrapped around on the right?
Yes, that's his or her tail all the way to the right. So, they have extraordinarily long prehensile tails. You can see the same thing here with the alpha male. Yeah. But outdone still by this Jeffries tamarin. Look at the tail on that guy. And, really interesting monkey. Hi.
I was going to ask, do those animals hibernate?
I don't know. This is the tropics, so it stays the same temperature and the same climate pretty much all year round. So there's probably no reason for an animal to hibernate here. Thanks, though. There's a close-up of this fellow. Actually, look at the toes on. Separate from the amazing tail, the toes are absolutely incredible. And then the other monkey that we saw quite frequently were these white-faced capuchin. These guys are noisy, loud, aggressive, and a little fierce-looking, frankly. But we would get good glimpses of them as well. Far less scary were the coati. So the quadia is a little bit like a raccoon, but has a prehensile tail. Unlike a raccoon, it's diurnal, so you see them during the day a lot. So they'll be trotting across the Pipeline Road or trotting across the park. So you see them fairly frequently. Pretty cool mammal. You also see agouti. So this is sort of related to a guinea pig. It's one of the larger rodents in the world. And you'll see them on the forest floor like this, scavenging about. This guy's got some kind of fruit or pod in his mouth. And then red-tailed squirrel. Just kind of reminded me of our fox squirrels, but you would see them occasionally. And just a couple others. The forest floor was always littered with critters. This is a tiny little forest toad, like no bigger than your pinky nail. Lots of good dragonflies. I would go back just to do dragonflies and butterflies. It was quite amazing. And then this really kind of took me aback. This was a wasp's nest that, like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was so architectural in form with those ribs. These are northern warrior wasps. They're actually quite aggressive. They actually hurt a lot if they sting you. And fortunately, I had a long camera lens, and I didn't know that at the time. But I was not in danger, but I was also ignorant. And there's a close-up. Fierce critters. And then you would come across things like this just beautiful grasshopper, incredibly colorful. A short-horned grasshopper, apparently. Great butterflies. This one was actually flying inside the Canopy Tower. Must have come in through the hole in the ceiling. I liked this striped streak butterfly a lot. The tail, you can see the tail is actually mimicking antennas. It's an intentional adaptation so that if it is hunted, the predator will miss the actual head and kind of fly right through the tail. A cattle heart butterfly, it was just kind of cool. Tiger longwing. And then we saw lots of blue morphos, particularly along Pipeline Road, and I kept trying to get a picture of a blue morpho in flight so you could see that incredible iridescent blue. I never quite captured it. And of course, when they land, they would, for me at least, always close their wings so all I could see is the underside. But I'll have to say, the underside's pretty spectacular too. So huge butterfly, beautiful. We did get to go out at night. I love a little bit of owling and night birding or night adventures. And we saw some cool birds, but we also saw some cool mammals. There are two types of opossums in Panama. This is the Derby's woolly opossum. And then there's the quote-unquote common opossum, who also doesn't, neither of them looks anything like our opossum. Also the kinkajou, sort of nicknamed a honey bear. Interesting fact about kinkajou, the name kinkajou actually comes from the French very similar word, which in turn was an adaptation from an Algonquin word meaning wolverine. So those of you who are University of Michigan affiliated, you actually have something in common with the kinkajou. And we did see see and hear some owls, and I got a good picture of this crested owl. It was quite fun to go out and see these creatures. All right, so that's Canopy Tower. Quick next stop here. We then drove, I want to say it was about 2.5, maybe 3 hours from Canopy Tower down to Canopy Lodge, also part of the same family and ownership. Canopy Lodge is located in this region, which is referred to as El Valle de Anton, excuse my really bad Spanish pronunciation. The El Valle is the caldera of an old volcano. It probably last erupted around 300,000 years ago, so it's not that old a volcano. The caldera now is quite broad, and the entire town of El Valle de Anton sort of sits in this caldera, and then then the rim of the volcano then rises very rapidly. So you hike up to the upper ends. So if this is all much higher than Canopy Tower, which was down around sea level. You were just a few hundred feet above the canal. This is probably around 2,000 feet above sea level at the base of the caldera, and then if you hike up to the top of the rim of the volcano, that's at about 4,000 feet. So 2,000-foot elevation difference. Very lush, very wet, streams running down through, and absolutely beautiful. And this is the Canopy Lodge. Again, I will impose a crappy video on you, but at least gives you a sense. The lodge is quite beautiful. The owner, Raul, he grew up here. His father built the original lodge here. So this is where he summered every year as a kid. And then he really decided to turn it into an eco lodge. And this was, I think, his first one, even before he built out the tower. Gorgeous streams running through. Those of you who follow the Cornell bird cams, this is one of their cams. This is one of their stations, so you can jump online anytime and see what's going on at Canopy Lodge today. Incredibly lush, lots of great habitat. You could just stay here and bird all day. You would not have to leave the property. It was quite extraordinary. And that is the station where the cam is set up. You can see that little birdhouse in the foreground. That's actually the camera that's pointed on that station. So you can be a peeping visitor to that neck of the woods anytime you want. A little bit more appointed than Canopy Tower, a little bit more comfortable. The room's really nice. Again, we ate outside every night under this roof, open air. It was really a very comfortable place to stay. I enjoyed it a lot. And then the rooms are sort of towards the back. So just the next few shots, this is just literally sitting, at the lodge, like without even taking a step away. Again, crimson-backed tanagers, these black-chested jays were always at the feeding station. Dusky-faced tanager, that was a new one for me. Oh, and then chachalakas. These guys are they're in the shrubbery all around the property. You'll go walking around, tiptoeing very quietly to see some small wren or hummingbird, and all of a sudden you'll spook one of these guys, and then they will spook you as they explode out of the shrubs. Goofy birds. But this is more of the kind of wren I was looking for. This is a bay wren. She was working on her nest, he or she, right by the lodge. I always love the red-legged honey creepers, just crazy, colorful birds. Look at the crest on that guy, and those crazy red legs. Just a beautiful bird. That's the female, little drabber, still's got the red legs. And yet another flycatcher. This is the rusty margin flycatcher. I had a tough time actually telling these apart from solitary flycatchers. This one was fish or sort of insect hunting over the pond, doing this acrobatic dance to pluck insects right off the water. Streaked flycatcher, really large bird, really quite handsome, sitting right outside our door. Orange-billed sparrows hopping all around the grounds. And this yellow-faced grass quit doing just what a grass quit does, which is grabbing hold of grass seed quite successfully. Hummingbirds were very cooperative there. This is a rufous-tailed. A little bit less cooperative. It took me quite a while to get a picture of this snowy-bellied hummingbird. I finally did. Not a very good one, but at least I got it. But this was the star. So right there at Canopy Lodge, they have quite intentionally planted a big patch of heliconia, which is that beautiful, exotic, tropical flowering bush. And these guys, the white-tipped sicklebills, have fully evolved to take perfect advantage of this particular plant. And so we had the great good fortune to just sit outside our room and watch this bird for 40 minutes or more. He was often snoozing like this. There's a bit of a close-up, so you can see that crazy, almost semicircular bill that adapted now to be able to get inside the flower. There he was stretching. He was waking up. He was kind of getting a little hungry. There's another quick close-up. You can see sort of the pollen on his beak from past feedings. Beautiful feathers. And as he was stretching and kind of getting ready for a meal, this bee came buzzing up to him and started to annoy him, and then really started to annoy him. And I couldn't tell whether he was thinking about trying to catch the bee. They are primarily nectar feeders, but they will eat insects, and they do it by just chomping on them. And so I wasn't sure. You can see that bee actually has pollen, is laden with pollen on its legs. But in the end, the bee went away, and then this guy started doing his thing and feeding on the heliconia. And unlike other hummingbirds, right, that hover and feed at the flower, these guys latch on. They perch when they're feeding, and they do it in a very intentional way. They use one leg to anchor themselves to the flower, and then with the other leg, they pull that inner yellow part of the flower down so they can then enter the flower with their beak. And here he is doing it again. You can see even more easily, see the right hand talon is hooked onto the red flower. The left hand talon, he's grabbed that yellow petal or stamen or whatever it is and pulled it down so that he can insert his beak into the flower and get to the nectar. Really special bird. So that was truly a treat for us, just sitting in our, literally 2 steps out of our door. So leaving the lodge, hard to do because there was so much good stuff right there, but leaving the lodge, you could go then and work your way up the rim of the volcano. And again, here's a quick video clip just to give you a sense of what the landscape looks like. So, again, we're only at about 4,000 feet. I think the highest point in Panama is more like 11,000 feet, and I know Costa Rica has probably even higher. This does sort of qualify as cloud forest, even though it's not as high in elevation as some of those places, but it was quite wet, and it makes for a whole really rich habitat for all sorts of birds. We saw 4 different kinds of motmots. This is the Lessons motmot, really attractive. Motmots, tough to see. When you see them, they're kind of good for photographers. They just sit there. So once you can find them, you can get some good photos, except that they're always deep in the trees. So you have to, 1, get a clear line of sight, and 2, hope there's enough light. So there's the Lesson close up. And then this is a Rufous motmot. And this guy cracked me up because I literally felt like I was watching a grandfather clock. His tail would tick and tock and tick. And then he would flip around and show you the back side of his tail. Then he'd flip back and go tick-tock. It was really cool. So these guys are kind of solitary hunters. They'll just sit there, and then when they catch eye of prey, whether it's an insect or a lizard or a piece of fruit, then they'll go and grab it. Broad-billed motmot, similar coloration, but smaller. I don't know if you can see, but that broad bill is also really serrated. So looks like a pretty good knife for cutting through whatever it is he eats. And then even smaller, this little toddy motmot. Also got to see yet another type of trogon. This is a gartered trogon. This is a male, I think. And I think we also saw collared trogons while we were there. Then got to see this toucanet, northern emerald. What a beautiful bird this is. Just, again, like really kind of blessed to be able to get such a clear view of a bird like this. Can you see the almost translucent tip of its beak? Yeah, beautiful. Double-toothed kite, a new hawk for me, small hawk, and intentionally named for this feature. Its upper mandible is notched. It's got a couple notches in it, which allows this bird to, frankly, tear apart its prey using both its beak and its talons together. So it just makes it more effective at dismembering its prey. These guys generally eat small lizards and frogs. And one of the things they're known for is to follow troops of monkeys, like the ones we saw earlier, because as those monkeys are kind of crashing through the canopy, they flush out lizards and other critters, and then the hawk is coming behind and goes and grabs them. A couple different saltators. This is a black-headed saltator. Also saw lots of buff-throated saltators at the lodge. Southern lapwing, kind of a cool bird. It was, we saw it both in the highland fields and also in the base of the caldera. More fun tanagers. This is the tawny-crested. Golden hooded was not a new one for me. I'd seen this in Belize, but I'll take it anytime I can get it. This one was in this beautiful flowering bush, eating the pips of flowers that were already over, and just really gorging itself on these red pips. Silver-throated tanager, that was another new one for me. And then this white-winged Bacard, really dramatic-looking bird. That was tough to get my lens on. Even harder, some of these wrens. Here's a rufous and white wren. Hey, a new warbler too. I did see a fair number of warblers that are familiar to us. We saw bay-breasted. I saw lots of chestnut-sided warblers, but this is the chestnut-capped warbler, which doesn't make it up to us, but looks somewhat similar and is quite perky. Lots of different euphonias. This is the tawny-capped, probably the most attractive, but there were lots of euphonias, and I had a tough time telling them apart from each other. More manakins. This is the white-ruffed manakin. This one does make that clicking sound, right? Using its feathers to make a clicking sound in addition to its calls. This is the female, a lot drabber, but that's a kind of fun shot. And then the gold-collared mannequin. Here's the male, looking pretty great. Again, these guys are skulky. I always feel really lucky when I can get a picture of one. And this one was just belting it out. And the female was not too far away. There she is. And then this was also a really special bird. I had the privilege to go out one day solo with one of the guides. I think he was dead set to show me something that few people see. So we were pretty high up, and then we went pretty deep into the forest. He must have known this bird was there. And he insisted on calling it out, and that made me a little uncomfortable, but I could tell he was going to do this whether I said yay or nay. And I kind of got the sense he was doing this as much for himself as it was for me. But he played a recording, and this bird came out immediately and took a good hard look at us. The black-crowned Antpitta, pretty rare. It's one of the rarer birds to see in Panama. I feel lucky to have seen it. Long-tailed tyrant, beautiful. I was kind of bummed. This was late in the day. The sun was really bad, but it was a beautiful bird. And I kept wanting to get a decent picture of it. Never really did, but it's pretty spectacular. Those tail feathers are unbelievable. And then lastly, we did have the privilege to see, actually it was a pair of spectacled owls on a nest deep in the forest, down in the base of the caldera. And lest you be concerned, this was taken with a scope. And so this was actually an iPhone photo through the scope. We were well distant from this owl, or this pair of owls. That was really special. And then a few other non-avian critters. Basilisks were to be found in the lodge. You could see them pretty often basking by the river. Pretty fierce-looking guys, right? These are what are they called? Jesus lizards, right? So they're able to run across water, so hence the Jesus nickname. And they have these crazy crests at the back. You can sort of see it here. So they look quite bizarre because they stand up as they run, and they're running on their hind feet. Also, this amazing other lizard, apparently a delicate ameva, absolutely really elegant, beautiful, slim, and quite large lizard. I was like, ooh, you're interesting. And then I did go out at night, and one of the things that just blew me away was this. I mean, this is so aptly named. This toad is literally bigger than a softball. It was huge, absolutely huge, sitting at the edge of the pond. That's Jabba the Hutt there for sure. Great spiders. This is a golden silk spider. How am I doing in time here? So this is in the Orbweaver family, and like a number of the Orbweavers, big difference between the sexes. So the female is huge and gorgeous, and that, if you look straight north of the female, you'll see the little male. Pretty tiny, diminutive little male. The guides, I think, were trying to sell us on the notion that this is a species that what they call sexual cannibalism, right? So they mate and then the female eats the male. That's actually not correct with this species. So I'll let the guides do their thing, but it's a beautiful spider. More great butterflies, the Confusa Tigerwing. We saw a lot of these. Lots of peacocks. This is a banded peacock. I saw a white peacock as well. And then this was, I thought, a particularly beautiful butterfly, a Tiesa satyr butterfly. Just really great colors. Crimson patch. And then another really cool dragonfly, this racket-tipped ruby spot. And I would be remiss if I didn't try to include a picture of leaf eater ants. So you see these ants streaming across the forest floor or along wires like this. And these are clearly leaf cutters, right? They're chomping away bits of leaf, bringing it to their nest, I think because they actually are growing a fungus in their nest. And so this leaf is actually, I think, for the fungus, or maybe to, is that right? Yes, I'm getting thumbs up from somebody more knowledgeable than I in the audience. And if I understand correctly, these colonies can be up to 5 million ants in a single colony with a single queen. And like many ants, the different ants within the colony have different tasks and are optimized for different jobs. So really cool critters. And then the very last critter in the lodge I'll share with you is this cicada. This is actually an angular moss cicada. It's in certain places around the lodge. These were so loud, I felt like I was in a dentist chair being drilled on. It was incredibly loud. Finding them, however, was really hard. It took me quite a while to actually get a photograph of one of these guys. First to find it, and then to photograph it. So that was the extent of our mostly birding adventure. We went from there, we drove back to Panama City, and then took a domestic flight within Panama. I don't think it was more than an hour and a quarter flight, across the country to the Bocas del Toro region on the Caribbean side. Beautiful area. And we landed in, if you go up to the top, you'll see Bocas del Toro. That's the actual airport up at the top of this map. And then we jumped in a water cab, a small boat, picked us up, and took us about 45 minutes south, down through between the islands, and then into some of the mangrove bays, squeezing through a couple sort of isthmus, and brought us to Coco Vivo. Coco Vivo is a small eco-lodge that sits right on this mangrove bay in this water world. It has about, I don't know, 6 or 8 huts total, very simple. An Argentinian couple was managing the place. They were unbelievable cooks. And so while the surroundings were incredibly simple, I think we had sort of flush toilet at one end and then an outhouse at the other end. Yeah, there was running water, but no hot water, and not very reliable electricity. But it was absolutely beautiful. Again, I'll impose a short video on you so you can get a sense of the landscape. You can see that's my little underwater camera, not so little, sitting on the table. There's my wife, Alison. That's the main hut where we would eat. And you can see some of the ancillary huts. That's where folks would stay. This bay was absolutely gorgeous, not very trafficked, and it's hard to tell, but you literally roll off this dock and you're right on top of a gorgeous coral reef. And there was actually a small sunken sailboat, and that's the mast of it, and the boat is actually in the water, and it's being taken over by the reef. And then you can kind of see it was really simple but comfortable. This couple they fed us so well, I can't tell you. You'll see there's a little smoke there. They would light a smudge pot in the evenings to chase the mosquitoes away. They had 2 dogs. That's El Capitan there. Both of the dogs would go longboarding with you. They were awesome. Yeah, Capitan, he knows how to relax. And then you can sort of see the grasses and the reef. I think I've got a little bit looking back just to give you a sense. Yeah, so thatched huts. But it was super fun, I have to say. I highly recommend it if you're into camping. And then the reef was amazing. So you would literally spill off that dock directly over this reef. And I don't scuba dive. I like to snorkel. I've been to Belize. I've been to St. John's a lot. Turks and Caicos, Mustique. This was the most colorful and vibrant reef I've seen. The sponges, the colors, the soft corals were just exquisite. There's a branching tube sponge, beautiful purple. Pitted sponge. And you can see some of the worms. This is a feather duster worm in the lower base. The coral itself just looked incredibly healthy. These are finger coral. Just if you got close, all the corals would retract into the bony skeleton. But the minute you kind of pulled away a little bit, they'd come right back out again. It was super healthy. And I can't say the same. I mean, we've been going to St. John's now for 5 years every winter, and each year the coral reef looks a little bit less healthy every year. So this, at least, maybe by virtue of being a bit of a mangrove and a bit brackish, maybe a little bit, certainly more protected from tourism, but maybe also protected from disease a bit. As I said, lots of really interesting worms. I could have floated over this reef all day long, just looking at the small critters living in among the corals. That's a star feather worm. There's a split crown feather duster. There were a fair amount of fish, not as many fish as I've seen elsewhere in the Caribbean, but some of them were really new for me, I think by virtue of the location, and maybe because the lagoon was a little bit brackish. So the Atlantic spadefish were new for me. And you can see the bright yellow-tailed fish, those are schoolmaster snappers. And this school of Atlantic spadefish were there every day, and like the minute you rolled in, they wanted to see you. They would swim and kind of swirl around you. They were really curious. Often like whole swarms of these little herrings. This was a fish I'd known before. This is a Graysby. It's in the grouper family. It's kind of a skulky fish, kind of a little bit of equivalent to the barred antshrike. But so that was a familiar one for me and always gratifying. Blue striped grunts. The grunts are the opposite. They're pretty tame for snorkelers, so you can get good and cozy with them. Gray angelfish. There are about 6 of them here. They were there every day, feeding intensively on the reef. That's a shot of a dog snapper. Colors are actually, when you get that close, you start to really see the colors. Sergeant majors. These are pretty common. We see these a lot elsewhere in the Caribbean. They were also active feeders at this reef. Great barracuda. I seem to attract them. I think it's because my camera has shiny clasps, and barracudas do like shiny objects, so I feel like I almost never go snorkeling and don't see a barracuda. I'm always a little more relieved when they're juveniles rather than full adults, but they're a lot less scary than they look. This was new for me, a large-eyed toadfish. I don't know how easily you can make it out. It's pretty well camouflaged. So it's right in the middle of the screen, brown and white with this big oval dark eye. Turns out these fish are have a really ancient pedigree. Like the very close relatives go back to the Cretaceous period. So kind of they're back with dinosaurs. And these are bottom dwellers. Also, interestingly, they can live up to 24 hours out of the water and have been known to flap their way across mudflats to get from one side of a lagoon to another. And they're bottom dwellers. They kind of camouflage themselves and then will jump out to grab something that's passing by. A bridled burrfish. This is in the in that porcupine fish family. So this guy will inflate and really stick his spines out. You can sort of see his spines, but when he inflates, all those spines stick straight out. So he looks pretty formidable. This is really a night fish, and I did go night snorkeling, which was kind of crazy, and so I saw him again at night. During the day, they're usually just pretty chill and just staying quite still. Yellow stingray, small stingray. This was new for me. I think they like lagoons. But then Caribbean Whiptail Stingray. And to give you a sense of scale, where that other stingray is probably the size of a dinner plate, this guy's the size of a car tire. And you can sort of see there's a remora suckerfish attached to his tail, so that kind of gives you a little bit more sense of the scale. And these guys settle down in the mud. They do have a venomous barb on their tail. If you get hit by that barb, it will really hurt. It can make you feel pretty crummy too. I mean, but these folks aren't aggressive. The only time that really happens if you step on them by accident. So it's not something to really. But you don't want to corner them. You want to give them a lot of space. At the far less aggressive end of the spectrum, lots of starfish. This is a cushion sea star. It was fun to see these guys. They would change positions every day, so you'd have to go see where they had kind of very slowly crawled during the night. Lots and lots of brittle stars weaved in through the coral reef as well. A whole host of different anemones that I had never seen before. This is a corkscrew anemone. This is the one in that sort of dark kind of brown and white. Clams of different types. This is a rough file clam. Also very active. Their tentacles would be, sort of moving all around. It was really intoxicating to watch. And then sea cucumbers. This is a chocolate chip sea cucumber. It was one of, I think, 2 or 3 species that I saw. Aptly named, kind of gross. But again, I just love the diversity. And there were a fair number of jellyfish. No, they weren't bothersome. There were 2 or 3 types. Only one was a stinging type, and you could pretty easily avoid it. This is an Asian moon jellyfish. They didn't sting at all. I kept bumping into them, particularly when I went night snorkeling. Also, tiny little ones called sea walnuts. Fun to try to photograph. Like, not that easy to photograph something that's nearly transparent. And then this was the one type that if you got into those tentacles, it hurt. It's a sea nettle. Interestingly, when I posted this to iNaturalist, it's not the sea nettle that's typical in the Caribbean. And somebody on iNaturalist got really excited when I posted this and said that this was probably an example of a yet undocumented new species that I got the impression this individual was working on trying to document sufficiently to get it recognized as a separate species. So that was kind of cool. You gotta love iNaturalist. And then I had never seen these before, mangrove upside-down jellyfish. So these are true jellyfish, except that they don't float. They sit on the bottom of the lagoon upside down with their underside facing up. A host of reasons for that. There's some of it's symbiotic with some algae, and I think also just the way they collect their food. But really curious. Here's 2 together. Some of them would have these beautiful colored sort of feathered appendages. So that was an entirely new and bizarre creature for me. And then lots of different, urchins. A reef urchin here is just, again, if you're a photographer, you just got to love the colors and the textures of creatures like this. And then lastly, what's often called a sailor's eyeball. Looks hard. It's actually the size of a little bit bigger than a quarter, kind of the size of a very large marble or a gumball. It's actually not hard, even though it looks kind of metallic. It is actually a form of algae, and that large bubble algae is a single cell. That is a single cell organism, one of the largest in the world, single-celled organism. So there's another fun fact for you. Don't say I didn't share something interesting with you tonight. And also, when I was night snorkeling, I did bump into this spider crab, sometimes called the Caribbean king crab. That was really cool. And the giant anemone was really active at night, so it was really fun to shine a flashlight on it and see its tentacles all moving around. It took me a little while to get my heart rate down when I first jumped in, but after I got used to it, it was a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. And last, I did want to share 1 or 2 land creatures. I love different orb weavers. This guy was crazy. Spinybacked Orbweaver. We had lots of crabs in the mangroves, so you couldn't take a step without a mudflat fiddler crab kind of popping up and running by you. And then in our hut, or not in, I don't think we ever had them physically in the hut, but we had lots of these mangrove tree crabs around our hut, including this was our sink where we brushed our teeth. Turns out mangrove tree crabs seem to love toothpaste. So they were always there waiting for us to brush our teeth. And I'll just close with this view. I'm a little bummed that the audio's not working because I was going to end with what looks like a very peaceful scene was actually a bit cacophonous. At night, we would hear a common paraki every night. Like, it felt like it was right outside our hut. I think every night I got up with a flashlight to go see if I could see the damn bird. And I got glimpses of it, but never got a photo. And then I never did see this gray cowl wood rail, but also was right there next to our cabin and was often singing, or 2 of them actually, duetting sort of in the morning. So not entirely peaceful, but it was certainly invigorating and energizing if you're an animal lover as I am. So that's it. I thank you for your indulgence, and I'm happy to take some questions. And let me come down so we can share the mic so that people can hear the questions, if there are any. Anyone have questions? Yeah. Hey. Here you go.
Thanks for that. Really great pictures. One of the birds you had mentioned, they photographed, from how you photographed it, it was hovering above the water.
Uh-huh.
I was curious, and you said it was hunting insects that were probably like nesting or something.
Was that the black mango?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did it ever dip into the water, or was it just hovering above?
I didn't see it dipping into the water. That doesn't mean it couldn't have, I suppose. It was incredibly aerial. So, did you ask for a reason?
I was just curious.
Yeah. Thanks. Other questions, comments? I get the sense some of you have been to Panama as well. Hey.
I was just going to ask, who's your travel agent?
My wife, who's right up there. She does all the research, and she's really good at it. No, I mean, every once in a while we'll use a travel agent, but the Canopy lodges are really well known. So if you're a birder, that's an easy choice. And they make it super easy for you. They come to the airport, they meet you, they take you straight there, they take you from there to the next place. So that's like too seamless. But it wasn't hard to fly across the country and to make our way from the Bocas del Toro airport in town. And so it's a beautiful country, incredibly friendly people. I will say, by virtue of our presence there, you can get by with English. I don't speak any Spanish. You can get by just fine with English. It's lovely people, super engaged. I look forward to going back and actually getting more to know about the people and the culture and the country itself. As you could tell, we sort of flew in intensive wildlifing and then flew out. We only got to spend, we came back from Coco Vivo, landed back in Panama City in the afternoon. We went and just dropped our stuff off at an airport hotel, and then we went in to explore Panama City only for a late afternoon and dinner. And it was, we went to some of the old parts of the town. And Panama City has so much rich history, just gorgeous architecture in the midst of what is actually a serious metropolis. I had not appreciated what a serious capital. If you don't know, Panama City is a big finance center. And so it has, you know, skyscrapers that rival just about any city, but it also has old parts of the city that are absolutely gorgeous, and I want to spend more time there. Hey.
I was gonna ask how large are the animals?
How large? All right, so that black-capped pygmy tyrant is like that big, tiniest little passerine bird in the world, I think, or at least one of them. The biggest, probably that stingray was the biggest animal I showed you, but those howler monkeys are pretty big too. Yeah, Kate. And
So I actually have a comment. I just wanted to say, based on what Keith was saying about the history of Panama, if you're interested, there's a really good novel called The Great Divide, which is about the history of the building of the Panama Canal. So it's told from the viewpoint of the local people, the viewpoint of the people who came in and basically took over and said we're building the Panama Canal. Very well written, really interesting.
cool. Kate, thanks for that. More. I'll go to James and then I'll come back.
I know that habitat loss is a big problem across Central and, well, everywhere really, but also in Central and South America. And I was just wondering what your experience was like with that, or if you spoke with anyone about, you know, did these beautiful pieces of habitat, was it fragmented? Did it feel like, is it a growing problem? Are there efforts to conserve land? I don't know if you have anything to say, but I'm curious.
Yeah, no, it was a little hard for me to tell. Like, I've never been to Costa Rica, so I don't have a baseline other than some time spent deep in Belize. So I would say that Panama seems to really understand that ecotourism and just being environmentally conscious is a really good and important thing. So I got a strong sense that there was a cultural ethos around that. I couldn't, and maybe we have folks here who can comment on that, and I'll come right over in a sec. But I personally didn't get enough of a sense of that. So and actually, let me run over, because I think we have somebody who knows Panama a lot better than I do. I thought you did. Here, why don't you introduce yourself here?
So about your question, there is a lot of work within the organizations that take care of forests and jungle. Actually, Battle Colorado Island and Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute is in Panama. And I was the manager of the island many years ago. And they really preserve the areas for research, and it's just for that, it's also for conservation, because the canal needs to keep the water levels, so there's protected areas around the canal. And some of the areas like Bocas del Toro and Chiriquí have the native indigenous protected areas too. So they cannot be touched. The problem is between Darien and Colombia, where the jungle, there's no roads to connect, but there is a lot of deforestation. So the harpy eagle habitat is mainly in that area due to the high trees. It has been a lot of work trying to protect those areas because the harpy eagles. Too bad you didn't visit the place in Clayton where they raise them.
No.
It is a sanctuary there.
Next time.
So they have different.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
you should visit Chiriquí.
Chiriquí? All right, it's on my list.
You can see the quetzal there.
Yeah, I want to. Hold on one second, I'm going to go back over this way. There were a couple other questions here. Yeah. Thank you for that color.
One of the species you showed was the Asian moon jellyfish.
Mhm.
With a name like that, I'm tempted to ask, is it an introduced species?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. I couldn't find anything in Wikipedia or online. I was wondering the same thing. I noticed, however, that there were other species as well, like you saw the, what was it, the West Indian spider crab. Again, I looked really hard, like, is that somehow introduced? I don't think so. I just, for whatever reason, it has that kind of foreign sounding name, but I don't know, is the honest truth. Does anybody here know? Okay. More question here?
Your talk, and by the way, thank you for bringing it to us, it's awesome.
No, thank you.
I get the feeling that you made your own time and place to go, and you created that yourselves, but then you talked about having guides that knew where to go. Can you comment on how much
Yep.
you depended on guides or just yourselves?
Yeah, so in the first two places, both at Canopy Tower and Canopy Lodge, these are well-established, great birding and eco lodge. You don't have to be a birder to visit there and get a lot out of it, but those two places, they run birding trips, tours, both in the morning and the afternoon. And so you don't have to be part of a group. You can just go there as we did as individuals, and every day you have the opportunity to go out or not. I mean, my wife is not as enthusiastic a birder as I am, so some days she would just opt to stay at the lodge or the tower and hang out. But you always had that option, and then you would also get the option, if you wanted to, we could wrangle a night trip out. So all of those were guided, and I would highly recommend it. I mean, if you really want to see wildlife, there's nothing like a local guide to really, help you see and find those creatures. Coco Viva was the opposite. We literally found it online. We booked a room through, actually, I think we even booked it through Airbnb, and then just showed up. And there were opportunities. We could have gone on a few sort of guided tours with other organizations that would have picked us up there, but we chose not to. There was so much going on right there, so we just sat there and indulged.
I just want to add that these good birding and eco lodges have fantastic local guides who have been trained. Same is true in Belize. I know it's true in Costa Rica. These young, mostly young guys, but also some women who grow up in these areas, and then they go to school and so on, but they become extremely knowledgeable, and they are just delightful to go through the countryside with. It would not be at all the same without them.
Thanks. Hi.
How big are the water areas in Panama?
The water areas?
Like those water areas?
They're big. So the coast of Panama opens out all the way into the Gulf of Mexico. So you can stay on that boat as long as you want to get all the way across the Gulf of Mexico to us. And the same thing on the other side of the country, which is not technically, it is the Pacific. Just it's still so bizarre to me to think about the Pacific being sort of south and maybe even east of where you're standing. But yeah, it's a pretty special place because it has both two oceans and all these glorious rivers and lakes internally. So it's a wonderful water world. All right, maybe one more question? Oh, one here.
Let's see. Thank you. What's a good starter underwater camera, or a camera that's good for underwater photography?
Yeah, I think you can find some pretty inexpensive point and shoot underwater cameras. That's what I started with. And you can do pretty well with them. The trick to underwater photography is not so much the camera, but then post-processing, because when you're photographing underwater, the water is filtering out a big chunk of the spectrum so that everything looks blue and green. And after you take the photo on your computer, if you really want to see the colors of the reef and the creatures, you need to sort of correct for that. And it's not hard. I do it in Lightroom. You can do it in Photoshop. But you get, I will just tell you, like, my interest and pleasure in underwater photography, like, went up multifold when I learned how to correct for the light on the computer. So all those photos that I showed you, I've adjusted because, you know, coming straight out of the camera, they just look very blue and green. But you can get a decent camera, not very expensive, that will even give you some zoom, and I would recommend a little zoom. I'm trying to remember the first one I had. I think was a little Sony, and it was, you know, it was easy, right? I could just have it on my wrist, and it had a little separate floaty, so if I ever dropped it, it would just float to the top. Does that help? Yeah. Okay, I think we probably have done enough for tonight. Thank you all. Much appreciated. What's that?
Wonderful.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Great. So we hope to see all of you again next month for our next program. And in the meantime, good birding to you all.